The carriage stopped at the gates of Wenlock House, just as the bells struck 4, and Helena Marsh stepped down onto a gravel drive that someone had recently raked. The footman who took her trunk had already been waiting 20 minutes. She could see it in the way he held his coat closed against the November wind. The housekeeper appeared at the top of the steps before Helena had even reached the door. Everything was prepared. Everything was expected. And in the inside pocket of Helena's traveling cloak, there was a contract signed in the Duke's own hand. A contract he had never written. "You're early, Miss Marsh." The housekeeper's voice was warm. Her hands were not. Helena watched them tremble against the keys at her waist. "Come in. The fire is ready. The room is ready." Helena thanked her by name and stepped through the doorway. She felt the temperature change at once. Wood smoke, beeswax, something underneath that she could not name. She asked, quietly, whether she might put one question to the housekeeper before she began. Mrs. Pell's keys went still. Helena asked her whether the Duke knew she was there. The housekeeper did not answer at first. She closed the door behind Helena with both hands, then turned the key. 2 locks. A bolt. The November wind cut off mid-word. "He knows the position has been filled," she said finally. "He does not know by whom." Helena asked then about the contract. Mrs. Pell told her, with the tremble now in her voice as well as in her hands, that it had been sent on the Duke's behalf, by those who had the right to act in his interest. Helena repeated the word back to her. Those, not he. The housekeeper confirmed it. Not he. Helena stood in the entrance hall and let her eyes move across the things she had not been told to look at. The portraits along the staircase had been recently dusted. The Persian runner had been rotated to hide a wear pattern. The brass knocker on the inside of the door had been polished within the hour. Someone had been preparing for her arrival with the kind of care reserved for inspections, or for visitations, or for the return of someone the household had been waiting for, without quite knowing why. "I should like to see my workroom now." "Of course." Mrs. Pell turned, then hesitated. "Miss Marsh, there is a letter in the writing desk. It has been there since the late Duchess passed. No one has touched it." "Why are you telling me?" "Because you are the first person in 3 years who has been brought here to mend something." Helena said nothing. She followed the older woman up the staircase, past the portraits, past a tall window that showed a garden going grey with frost. At the second landing, she paused. Mrs. Pell paused with her. "One more question." The housekeeper waited. She asked how long ago the advertisement had been placed. 4 months, the housekeeper answered. Helena asked how many seamstresses had come before her. None, Mrs. Pell said. None had come, because the advertisement had been very specific. It had asked for a particular kind of discretion. Helena asked her what kind. Mrs. Pell looked at her for a long moment. The tremble in her hands had spread to her voice. "The kind that knows how to repair what other people refuse to admit is broken." She turned and continued up the stairs. Helena followed. Behind her, 3 floors below, the great clock struck the 1/4 hour, and the house, which had been waiting for her for 4 months, perhaps for longer, exhaled. The workroom was in the east wing, 2 doors from the late Duchess's apartments. It had been a sewing parlour once. Mrs. Pell had aired it that morning. Helena could smell the lavender she had laid on the windowsills. But the furniture was not the airy, lacquered French pieces that an aging duchess would have ordered. Everything in this room was old. The writing desk in the corner was walnut so dark it looked black, with brass fittings worn smooth by hands that had not been here in 3 years. Helena set her sewing case on the long table by the window. She did not yet remove her gloves. She walked the perimeter of the room first, the way a horsewoman walks a paddock before she enters with the saddle. She touched nothing. She catalogued. A bolt of dove-grey wool, untouched. 3 spools of silk thread, the colours faded slightly from light. A pair of shears in their original case. a pincushion shaped like a strawberry, handmade. And on the writing desk, half tucked under a leather blotter, the corner of an envelope. She did not reach for it. Instead, she removed her gloves, finger by finger, and laid them on the table. Then she crossed to the window and looked out at the garden. From the second story, she could see what the front courtyard had hidden. The rose garden, dormant now. The canes pruned back to their black bones. Beyond it, the orangery. Beyond that, the dovecote and the old well. Someone had once loved this garden, the way other women loved their children. Helena knew the look of such a garden. Her grandmother had kept one. When she turned back to the room, her eye caught on the wall above the mantel. There was a portrait there. She had not noticed it on entering. The angle was wrong from the doorway. Now she saw it. A woman in her 40s, seated in a high-backed chair, hands folded in her lap. Her gown was the color of old wine. The hem was embroidered with a pattern of small roses, 6-petaled, each stitched in an unusual technique that Helena recognized before her mind had finished naming what she was seeing. A back stitch in 3 threads. The center thread tied off into a tiny anchor knot, invisible from the right side. A stitch her grandmother had taught her when she was 9 years old. A stitch her grandmother had said no one else used anymore. Not the modistes in London, not the embroiderers in Bath. A stitch her grandmother had called the rose stitch because of where she had first put it. Helena stepped closer to the painting. She climbed onto the footstool by the mantel. She traced the air an inch above the canvas, following the stitching, counting the petals. 12 roses, each one anchored, each one her grandmother's hand. She stepped down from the footstool and stood very still in the center of the room. She did not move for a full minute. When she finally moved, it was to walk to the writing desk, lift the leather blotter, and look at the envelope underneath. The envelope was addressed in a woman's hand. To His Grace the Duke of Wenlock. From Caroline Ashford, his mother, by deed and by choice. The seal had not been broken. Beside the envelope, in a smaller hand, someone had written in pencil, "For Margaret's granddaughter, when she comes." Helena did not open the envelope. She did not touch it again. She covered it carefully with the blotter, returned to the long table, and began to lay out her tools. Shears, needles, the 3 spools of silk that had been waiting in this room for 3 years. There was a knock at the door. Mrs. Pell again, her face pale. "Miss Marsh, the Duke's coat has been brought up. He tore it last night in the study after a quarrel with his steward. It was his stepmother's gift to him. He has worn it every day for 9 years. Helena did not turn from the table. "Bring it in, Mrs. Bell." The coat was darker than she had expected. Charcoal wool with a thin black silk lining, the kind of garment a man wears when he wants the world to look past him. The tear was on the right shoulder, 3 inches long, ragged at the edges. He had not torn it on a nail. He had ripped it off and thrown it. Helena spread the coat on the long table and ran her thumb along the inside of the tear. The wool had grain. The lining had patience. She could see exactly where each had given way and exactly how to bring them back. She had been working for 40 minutes when the door opened without a knock. The Duke of Wenlock stood in the doorway. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 32, perhaps 33. Tall, dark-haired, with a face that had been disciplined into stillness so long it had stopped knowing how to move. He wore a plain shirt and waistcoat, no jacket. The shadow under his jaw said he had not slept. "Mrs. Pell tells me there is a seamstress in the East Wing." His voice was lower than she had expected. There was no anger in it. There was no welcome either. She agreed that there was, and that she was the one. He told her, in the same level voice, that he had not engaged a seamstress, and she answered that she was aware of that. He did not move from the doorway. His eyes went to the coat on the table, to the open tear, to her hands holding the lining flat with 2 fingers. Something in his face shifted by a millimeter and went still again. He told her, quietly, that the coat was his. She told him, quietly, that she knew. He asked who had told her to mend it. She said that no one had, that it had simply been brought up to her by Mrs. Pell. He observed that she had begun without asking his permission. Helena set down the needle she had not yet threaded. She turned her body to face him fully, but she did not move from her place at the table. She had learned from her grandmother that the most dangerous thing a woman could do in a powerful man's house was to try to fill the room with her body. Stillness was its own kind of authority. "Your Grace, I will stop if you wish. The coat will be returned to you in the condition I found it. But may I ask one question first?" He did not answer. He waited. "Did you wish for it to be mended? Or did you wish for it to stay torn, the way it was when you took it off?" The Duke's hand tightened on the doorframe. The knuckles whitened. He looked at the coat. He looked at her. He looked at the coat again. "Mend it." "Your Grace." "Mend it the way it was before I tore it, not the way it is now." "That is a different kind of mending." "I am aware." He turned to leave, then stopped. Without looking back, "When you have finished, bring it to my study, not to my valet, to me. I will tell you whether you have understood." The door closed behind him. Helena stood still for a moment. Then she lifted the coat closer to the lamp and bent over the tear. She did not begin with the wool. She began with the lining. 3 small back stitches in black silk thread, each one anchored with the knot her grandmother had taught her. The rose stitch. Hidden inside a coat the Duke had been wearing for 9 years. She worked for 90 minutes. When she was finished, the tear was gone. There was no scar, no thicker patch, no sign that the wool had ever given way. She held the coat up to the light. She turned it slowly, looking for the weakness. She did not find it. She did not bring the coat to the study that night. She brought it to him at 9:30 the next morning, when the house was alive with the sounds of breakfast trays and footmen on stairs. The Duke was at his desk, writing. He set down his pen as she came in. "Lay it across the chair." She did. She did not leave. He stood, came around the desk, and lifted the coat from the chair. His hands moved over it the way a horseman runs his hand down a strange horse's flank, checking, listening, waiting for the muscle to flinch. When he reached the right shoulder, he stopped. He turned the coat in his hands. He held it up to the morning light from the tall window. He observed aloud that there was no tear, and she confirmed quietly that there was not. He observed that there was no patch either, and she confirmed this also. He held the coat to the light a 3rd time, close to his face, then away, then close again, the way a man examines a thing he expects to find a flaw in and refuses to admit he is hoping not to. "How did you do this?" "With the same kind of stitch the original maker used, Your Grace, and the same kind of thread." "How could you possibly know what kind of stitch the original maker used?" "Because I recognized her work, Your Grace. The coat was made by a woman who used the same back stitch on her hidden seams that she used on her embroidery. I saw it on the lady in the painting in my workroom. I learned the stitch from my grandmother, who taught it to her." The Duke went very still. He did not look at Helena. He looked at the coat. After a long moment, he said, almost too quietly to be heard, "That is not possible." "Why not, Your Grace?" "Because the woman in the painting has been gone for 3 years, and the coat was a gift to me from my stepmother on the day I turned 23. She made it herself." "Yes, Your Grace." "Yes," he repeated. The single word seemed to cost him something. He walked back to his desk and sat down. He did not put the coat on. He folded it carefully and laid it across the back of a second chair, the way one lays an honored thing. "Miss Marsh." "Your Grace." "Why did you say nothing when you arrived? Why did you let Mrs. Pell believe I had hired you?" Why did you not tell me at once that you knew this house, knew its embroidery, knew—" "Because I did not know if I should be afraid of you, Your Grace. And I did not know if you should be afraid of me." He almost smiled. It did not reach his mouth. It moved through his eyes for half a heartbeat, and was gone. "Have you decided?" "Not yet." "When you decide, Miss Marsh, will you tell me?" "I will, Your Grace." She turned to leave. At the door she paused. There was a stack of books on the side table. 3 of them, leather bindings cracked, spines split, gilt rubbed away to bare board. She had noticed them the day before. She noticed them again now. She said his name. He answered with hers. She told him, quietly, that she should like to take the 3 books on his side table to her workroom. He asked her why. She said it was because they were also torn. He looked at the books. He looked at her. He told her to take them. She gathered the 3 books in her arms and left the study. The hallway smelled of beeswax and something underneath. The same something she had not been able to name when she arrived. Now, walking back to the East Wing with the late Duchess's old volumes against her chest, she could name it. It was the smell of a house where someone had been waiting for help and had stopped expecting it to come. She rebound the books over the next 2 days. The first was a book of poetry. The second was a book of household receipts in the late Duchess's hand. The third was a ledger. The ledger was not what she had expected. It was not a book of accounts in the formal sense. It was the personal record of a woman who had managed a great estate for 9 years and had wanted to know herself where every shilling went. The pages were ruled in pencil. The columns were hand-drawn. The handwriting was the same hand that had addressed the unopened letter in the writing desk. Helena did not intend to read it. She intended only to repair the binding and the 7 pages where the threads had pulled loose. But the page she picked up first was the one that had broken away cleanest, and her eye fell on a column of numbers in the middle of it. Linen, kitchen, £4 6 shillings. Coal, North Wing, £11 2 shillings. Stipend, garden boy, £1 4 shillings. Repair of dovecote roof, £18. She read down the column. She read down the next column. She read across to the totals. She set the book down on the table and picked up a clean sheet of paper from her sewing case. She copied out the numbers from 1 quarter, 3 months of household expenses as the late Duchess had recorded them in her own hand. Then she copied out the same 3 months from a sheet she had asked Mrs. Pell to bring her that morning, on a different pretext. The household accounts as the steward had recorded them in the formal estate book. The numbers did not match. They did not match by small amounts. They matched in the quarters where they should match: wages, food, ordinary upkeep. They diverged in 3 categories: repairs, travel, and something the steward had labelled discretionary outlay for estate matters. The discrepancy, in 3 months, was just over £40. Helena finished rebinding the ledger before she did anything else. She tied the last knot in the spine. She trimmed the loose threads. She set the book on the table and put her hands flat on either side of it. Then she went to find Mrs. Pell. She found Mrs. Pell at the linen press in the back hallway. She asked, quietly, whether she might see the Duke. The housekeeper answered that he had the steward with him just now. Helena said that the steward was the very man she should like to be in the room with. The housekeeper looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. The study had 3 people in it when Helena entered. The Duke was at his desk. The steward, a thin man with thinner lips, named Mr. Whitcomb, was standing in front of it. A second man, the Duke's land agent, was by the window. They all turned when she came in. She apologized for the intrusion and said she had a question about the household accounts. The Duke's voice was even when he asked what sort of question. She told him it was a question she would prefer to ask in the presence of Mr. Whitcomb himself. Mr. Whitcomb's mouth moved slightly, but he did not speak. The Duke considered her for a moment, his pen still in his hand, and then told her quietly to ask. "Your Grace, when I rebound the late Duchess's personal ledger, I noticed that her record of the household expenses for the last quarter she lived does not match the formal estate accounts for the same quarter. I copied both out. The difference is £41.06. Would Mr. Whitcomb be able to explain to us where the additional £41 went?" The room was very still. The steward looked at Helena. He looked at the Duke. The corner of his mouth twitched in a way she had seen before in men who were calculating how fast they could get to a horse. "There must be an error in the late Duchess's bookkeeping, Your Grace. She was not formally trained." "Mr. Whitcomb," Helena said softly. "She was the daughter of a Cornish merchant. She kept her father's accounts from the age of 12. May we look at the rest of the years?" "Miss Marsh," the Duke said. His voice had changed. It was very careful. "Bring me the late Duchess's ledger. Bring me your copies. And Mr. Whitcomb, sit down." The investigation took the rest of the week. Helena was not asked to participate, but she was asked to sit in the corner of the study and remain available, in case her hands or her eyes were needed for something the men in the room could not do for themselves. She did not mind. She mended a torn page in the household receipts book. She rebound a frayed corner of a rent roll. She listened. By Friday evening, they had a number. Across 9 years of stewardship, Mr. Whitcomb had moved just over £600 out of the estate accounts and into a private outlet that none of them yet understood. The Duke dismissed Mr. Whitcomb temporarily. The magistrate would be summoned the following week, and locked the study door. Helena stayed where she was, in the corner chair, with the rebound rent roll across her lap. "Miss Marsh." "Your Grace?" "Will you walk with me? The garden is going to be cold, but I think I cannot stay in this room." "I will get my shawl." She got her shawl. She met him at the garden door. He had not put on a coat. He had pulled on the charcoal one she had mended. She noticed and said nothing. The rose garden in November was a garden of bones. The canes had been pruned back in October to clean black stems. The mulch had been laid. There were no leaves. There was no colour. The light was iron grey and soft. The Duke walked with his hands clasped behind his back, the way men walk when they cannot trust their hands to stay still. "My stepmother planted this garden the year she came to Wenlock." She asked how old he had been then, and he said 12. She said, more carefully, that his first mother had therefore already left earlier that same year. He stopped walking. He did not turn to look at her. He asked, very quietly, how she knew that. She said that she did not know it. She was only asking it. There was a long silence between them, the kind of silence that the bare canes seemed to lean into. Then he answered her. Yes, his mother had left in the spring. Caroline had come in the autumn, and his father had not waited long. Helena asked, quietly, whether his father had loved her. Caroline? Yes, eventually. He did not at first. He thought he was marrying a kind woman who would manage the household and raise his son. He did not know he was marrying a woman who would mend him, who would mend us both. She said softly that this was what Caroline had done, then. He answered that this was what Caroline had done. The wind moved through the bare canes. Helena pulled her shawl tighter. She looked at the dovecote at the far end of the garden, the one whose roof, in the late Duchess's ledger, had been repaired 3 times, each repair costing more than the one before, each repair authorized by Mr. Whitcomb. She told him that she had one more question for the night. He answered, with the smallest smile she had yet seen on him, that she had already asked many. She said this would be the last for tonight. He told her, with his hands still clasped behind his back, to ask it. She asked him why his mother had left. The Duke was silent for a long time. The garden grew darker around them. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than the wind. I do not know, Miss Marsh. She did not say. She left a note. The note said she was going where she could breathe. It did not say where that was. It did not say whether breathing was something she had stopped doing in our house. I have been a man for 20 years, Miss Marsh, and I still do not know whether I was the reason she could not breathe. Children are never the reason their mothers leave, Your Grace. He asked, very quietly, how she knew. She told him about her grandmother, about a woman who had been left by her own mother as a child, and had spent 50 years thinking she was the cause of it. He asked how the older woman had finally found out otherwise. Helena said that her grandmother had not, on her own, ever found out. She had told her grandmother herself, the day before her grandmother passed, and her grandmother had finally believed it, because Helena had not looked away from her once while she said it. The Duke's hand came up to his face. He did not weep. He simply pressed the heel of his hand against his eye for a long moment, and then lowered it, and they walked back to the house together in silence. The storm came on a Tuesday and lasted 3 days. The roads from the village were impassable by Wednesday morning. The post did not come. The magistrate did not come. Mr. Whitcomb, who had been ordered to remain on the estate until his case could be heard, did not even attempt to leave the steward's cottage. The household drew in on itself, the way households do in winter weather. Fires lit in rooms that were normally cold, doors closed against drafts, footsteps quieter on the stairs. Helena worked in her room until the wind drove a draft up through her window sill that made the candles gutter. Then she gathered her sewing case and her current project, a torn page in the household receipts book, and went to the library. The library was warm. The fire had been built up. The Duke was in the wing chair by the hearth with a book open in his lap that he was not reading. He looked up when she came in. He looked up at her by name as she came in. She said only that her workroom had gone cold and that she had come down to find a fire. He told her, with the smallest movement of his hand toward the chair across from him, that she did not need forgiveness for being warm, and that she should sit. She sat in the chair opposite him, on the other side of the fire. She set her sewing case on the small table between them. She opened the receipts book, took out her finest needle, and began the kind of paper mending that her grandmother had taught her. Silk thread thinner than a hair, stitches so small they vanished against the page. For a long time the only sounds were the fire and the wind. Miss Marsh, Your Grace, I wish to tell you something about my mother. I have not told it to anyone. I have not been able to. She lowered the needle. She did not look at him directly. Steel Rose understood that some things can only be said into a fire. I am listening. She left in May. The morning she left, she came to my room before dawn. I was 12. I was still asleep. She sat on the edge of my bed and put her hand on my hair. I half woke. I saw her in the dim. She said, "Henry, I want you to remember that you were the kindest person in this house." Then she kissed my forehead and went out, and I went back to sleep. And when I woke for breakfast, she was gone. What did you do? For 11 days I did nothing. I did not speak. The valet thought I was ill. The doctor came. My father did not. On the 12th day, my father came into the schoolroom and told me she was not coming back. I asked why. He said, "Because she is a coward." That was all he said. He never spoke of her again. Not once. Not until the day he died. And Caroline? Caroline came in the autumn. I was rude to her for 6 months. She did not punish me. She mended my torn shirts at her own writing desk in the evenings, and she did not say a word about my rudeness. And one night I came down the stairs at midnight because I could not sleep, and I found her at the desk, with my shirt in her lap and tears on her face. And I asked her why she was crying, and she said, "Because I want to take care of you, and you will not let me, and I do not know how to make you trust me." I sat down on the floor at her feet and put my head on her knee. I did not speak. She put her hand on my hair the way my mother had in the dark before she left. And then she was my mother. From that night to the night she died, she was my mother. Helena had set the needle down. She was not weeping. Steel Rose did not weep at other people's wounds. Steel Rose held the room steady so that the other person could weep. But she felt her grandmother's hand on her own hair, decades back, and she understood what it meant to be the witness someone has been waiting for. Your Grace, Caroline left a letter for you in the writing desk in my workroom. It has been there since she died. It has not been opened. He looked up. She wrote it to you, not to me. But the envelope has my grandmother's name in pencil on it, in her hand. I think she meant for me to bring it to you. I would like to bring it to you tomorrow. He did not answer. He nodded once. The fire moved between them. The roads cleared on Saturday. The post came at noon. With the post came a visitor in a black travelling carriage drawn by 2 greys, and the visitor did not announce himself ahead. The footman who answered the door took the calling card and came directly to the Duke in the breakfast room, with his face the colour of new bread. The footman announced quietly that Lord Marcus Vance was waiting in the front hall. The Duke set his cup down very carefully. He said only that he had not seen Lord Marcus in 11 months. The footman added that the visitor had come on a matter of family and would wait. The Duke gave his instructions evenly. Lord Marcus should be shown into the green drawing room and told that the Duke would be with him in a quarter of an hour, and Miss Marsh should be sent to him at once. Helena was already on her way to the breakfast room with the late Duchess's letter in her hand. She had come down the stairs intending to give it to him before luncheon. She met the footman halfway. She turned and went back up the stairs to put the letter in her workroom desk for safety, and then she came down to the breakfast room. The Duke was standing at the window. He did not turn when she came in. Miss Marsh, Caroline had a younger brother. His name is Marcus Vance. He has not visited Wenlock in 11 months. He has now arrived without invitation, and Mr. Whitcomb has been confined to the steward's cottage for 1 week. I do not believe these things are unrelated. Nor do I, Your Grace. I would like you to be in the green drawing room when I receive him. In what capacity, Your Grace? As a witness. Yes, Your Grace. The green drawing room had been the late Duchess's favourite. The walls were the soft green of moss after rain. The chairs were arranged for conversation, not display. Lord Marcus Vance was standing by the fireplace when they came in. He was perhaps 50 years old, sharply dressed, with the kind of charming smile that men cultivate the way other men cultivate vineyards, for a long, slow, expensive return. Lord Marcus opened with a smooth apology for the unannounced visit, and addressed the Duke by his first name. The Duke answered him by his name only. Lord Marcus paused as if just then noticing Helena, and asked her name in the way a man asks a question whose answer he already knows. The Duke said her name for her. Miss Marsh, in his employ on a private matter. Lord Marcus's eyes touched Helena and went still for 1 heartbeat, then moved on. But the still heartbeat had been there. He had recognized her, not by sight, by name. Helena saw it. Lord Marcus repeated her surname pleasantly and observed that it was an interesting name, that he had once known a Margaret Marsh, who had been Caroline's seamstress for many years. He asked whether Helena was any relation. Helena answered, plainly, that the woman he had named had been her grandmother. How charming. Henry, I do hope you have engaged her on the strength of her grandmother's recommendation, and not on— and here Lord Marcus's smile turned just slightly— any of the more eccentric correspondence Caroline carried on in her final years. Marcus. The Duke's voice was very level. What is your business at Wenlock today? My business, Henry, is concern. Concern for you. Concern for the estate. Concern that my poor sister's death has left you vulnerable to people who arrive at your gates with stories about old letters and old loyalties. Concern that Mr. Whitcomb, a steward of impeccable record, has been confined to his cottage on the word of a young woman whose family ties to this house are themselves a matter that ought to be handled carefully. Helena stood very still. Steel Rose did not interrupt. Steel Rose let the other person reveal his own shape, sentence by sentence, until the shape was undeniable. Mr. Whitcomb has been confined, the Duke said, on the strength of a discrepancy in the household ledgers. The discrepancy is documented. The documentation will go to the magistrate on Monday. Documented by Miss Marsh. Yes. Henry, forgive me. I cannot in good conscience leave this house tonight without saying what I have come to say. Caroline carried on a correspondence in her last years with this young woman's grandmother. It was not a healthy correspondence. It contained accusations against members of this family, myself included, that have no foundation in fact. If Miss Marsh has been brought into this house on the strength of those letters, then this house has been brought into the orbit of a slander that you, Henry, do not deserve, and a slander that I will not allow to be acted upon. The Duke did not answer. He looked at Helena. Helena, who had been standing very still by the window, moved for the first time since entering the room. She walked to the small writing desk in the corner of the green drawing room and laid down a leather portfolio. She had brought it from her workroom that morning. She had not opened it in the Duke's presence yet. She opened it now. Lord Marcus? Miss Marsh. You said my grandmother's letters to your sister contained accusations against you that had no foundation in fact. That is what I said. Then you have read them. A short pause. I have heard of them. From whom, my lord? Miss Marsh, I do not believe I am the one who is being interrogated in this room. You are not being interrogated, my lord. You are being asked to clarify a single point. From whom did you hear of letters between my grandmother and the late Duchess that you describe as containing baseless accusations against you? He did not answer. My lord, I will tell you what is in the leather portfolio on this desk. It contains 9 years of household ledgers, not the formal ledgers Mr. Whitcomb kept, but the personal ledgers the late Duchess kept in her own hand. They were sent to my grandmother, 4 pages at a time, every quarter, for 9 years. My grandmother kept them in a wooden box under her bed. She did not show them to me until the week before she died. She made me promise that if I were ever called to Wenlock, I would bring them with me. She lifted the top sheet from the portfolio, then the next, then the next. On this page, in 1818, Mr. Whitcomb authorized a payment of £41 for repairs to the Dovecote roof. The Dovecote roof, my lord, has not been repaired since 1812. I asked the gardener this morning. He has been at Wenlock 30 years. He showed me the original tiles. Miss, on this page, in 1820, Mr. Whitcomb authorized £86 for the purchase of a horse for the home farm. The horse was never delivered. The home farm records show the same draft team in 1820 as in 1819. I asked the head groom yesterday. Miss Marsh, on this page, in 1822, Mr. Whitcomb authorized £112 for travel expenses related to estate business in Bath. The Duke, and here she did not look at the Duke, but she felt him standing very still behind her, did not travel to Bath in 1822. I checked the carriage logs and the travelling trunk inventories this morning. She set the pages down. She turned to face Lord Marcus. My lord, the reason my grandmother kept these ledgers under her bed for 9 years is that the late Duchess told her, in writing, that the money was being taken by Mr. Whitcomb at the request of someone else in the family. That someone, my lord, was you. Not because Caroline guessed it, because you wrote her a letter in 1815 asking her to authorize the first payment. Caroline kept that letter. My grandmother had a copy of it. The copy is in this portfolio. She lifted a single sheet from the bottom of the stack. Lord Marcus's face had gone the colour of paper. My lord, I am not going to read it aloud. I am going to ask you one question, the same one I have already asked you. From whom did you hear of letters between my grandmother and your sister that you describe as containing baseless accusations against you? Because as far as I am aware, my lord, those letters have never been outside my grandmother's wooden box. Until today. The room was very quiet. The fire moved. Marcus. The Duke's voice was very gentle. It was the gentleness that comes after great noise. Sit down. Lord Marcus did not sit down. He looked at the Duke. He looked at Helena. He looked at the portfolio. Then, with the smallest possible movement, his shoulders dropped half an inch. Henry. Sit down, Marcus. He sat. The magistrate will be at Wenlock on Monday morning. You will remain in the blue bedroom until then. Robert, the Duke turned to his footman, who had been standing by the door. See to it that Lord Marcus is not disturbed and does not leave the house. Send a man to the village. I want the magistrate here by 10 o'clock Monday. The footman bowed and went out. Helena gathered the ledgers and the letter back into the portfolio. She closed the leather flap. Her hands were perfectly steady. They had not trembled once. Lord Marcus was taken upstairs. The footman closed the door of the blue bedroom and locked it. The household, which had been holding its breath since the carriage with the 2 greys had come up the drive, exhaled in soft, small ways. A kettle put on, a fire poked, a window opened a fraction to clear the morning's tension out of a room. The Duke and Helena were left alone in the green drawing room. He stood by the window for a long time. She stood by the writing desk with the closed portfolio in her hands. Neither of them moved. Miss Marsh. Your Grace. You have known about Mr. Whitcomb since the day you arrived. I suspected something was wrong when I rebound the late Duchess's personal ledger and saw the discrepancy. I did not know the full pattern until I had laid the Duchess's pages beside the formal estate book this week. I have known the truth, in its full shape, for 2 days. You did not tell me. No, Your Grace. Why? Because I had not yet decided whether you would be frightened of me, or grateful to me, or angry that I had been brought into your house under a false employment, and because I had not yet given you the letter. She lifted the leather portfolio. From inside it, she took the unopened envelope she had carried down from her workroom that morning. The envelope with the late Duchess's writing on the front, and her grandmother's name in pencil on the back. This is the letter Caroline wrote to you. It has been in the writing desk in my workroom since she died. I would like you to open it now, Your Grace, and I would like to be in the room with you when you do. He took the envelope. He looked at the seal. He looked at the pencil note on the back. His hand did not shake until he broke the seal. The letter was 3 pages. He read it in silence. He read it very slowly. When he finished, he set the pages on the writing desk and pressed the heel of his hand against his closed eye for a long moment. Miss Marsh. Your Grace? My stepmother wrote to your grandmother in the year she was first ill. She asked your grandmother to send her granddaughter to Wenlock, not as a seamstress, but as a witness. She wrote, "He will need someone who can see what is broken without being told it is broken. Someone whose hands have been taught the same lessons mine were. Someone who will not be afraid of the silence in his rooms." She asked your grandmother to wait. She did not want it to happen too soon. She wanted the grief to find its own shape first. Yes, Your Grace. She also wrote, Miss Marsh, she wrote, that she believed her own brother had been bleeding the estate for years, and that she was afraid I did not see it. She asked your grandmother's granddaughter to come because, in her words, only a witness from outside the house could see what those of us inside had stopped being able to see. Yes, Your Grace. She wrote that she loved me. She wrote, Miss Marsh, she wrote that on the day she met me, when I was 12, I had been the kindest person in the house, and that this had not changed in 20 years, and that this was the thing about me she had been most proud of mothering. He stopped. He turned away from her. He stood with his back to the room, and his hand braced against the windowsill. And he wept very quietly for perhaps 2 minutes. The kind of weeping that men do when they have spent 20 years not allowing themselves to weep. and the body has finally insisted. Helena did not move from the writing desk. She watched the back of his shoulders. She did not speak. When he had finished, he turned back to her. His face was wet, but his voice was steady. "Miss Marsh, I love you." "Your Grace." "I am aware that I have said it too soon, and in the wrong room and on the wrong day. I am aware. I am saying it anyway because if I do not say it now, in this room, with the letter on the table, I will spend another 20 years not saying it. I am not willing to be that man anymore." Helena looked at him for a long moment. She set the leather portfolio on the desk. "Then prove it, Your Grace." "How?" "Stay. In this house. Stop hiding in your study. Let me mend the rest of what your stepmother asked me to mend. Let me bring back your mother's name into your house, even if it is only her name, even if we never know where she went. Let me set a place for her at the table on her birthday, and not have it be a thing that breaks you. And then ask me to stay too. After that, not before." "Will you stay, Miss Marsh, after that?" "Ask me on the day, Your Grace. Not before." He nodded. He did not smile. He did something better. He picked up the letter from the desk, folded it carefully, and set it on the mantelpiece, where the light from the green drawing-room window would touch it every morning at the same hour. A year passed. The magistrate's case against Mr. Whitcomb was concluded in March. The case against Lord Marcus Vance was concluded in May. The estate received from the courts a sum that did not equal what had been taken, but that closed the wound enough for the Dovecote roof to be repaired in earnest, the home farm to receive its long-promised draft horse, and the library to be reshelved in the order the late Duchess had drawn up in her last living winter. In April, the Duke wrote a letter, for the first time in 20 years, to the parish where his mother had been raised. He did not yet know whether she was alive. The letter was returned in June, with a note from a young curate who had taken it to an elderly woman in a fishing village 2 parishes over and read it aloud to her. The elderly woman had wept. She had asked the curate to write back. She had been afraid to come home for 20 years because she had believed her son hated her. She had been wrong. She would come, if her son would have her, in the spring of the following year. In July, the Duke proposed to Helena Marsh in the rose garden, beside the canes that were now in full bloom, and Helena said yes. Not because the moment was beautiful, although it was, but because he asked her on the right day, and he asked her with the words she had been waiting to hear for a year. In September, they were married in the village church. The wedding lasted 20 minutes. There was no breakfast. There was no procession. There were 6 guests and a pair of doves released over the churchyard wall. A year and 1 week after Helena Marsh had first stepped down from a carriage onto the gravel drive of Wenlock House, she sat in the library at the old walnut writing table that had once been the late Duchess's. The fire was lit. The room was warm. On the table in front of her was Caroline Ashford's old book of letters, a leather volume with a broken spine and a torn front cover and 7 loose pages. Helena was rebinding it. Her needle moved in small backstitches in 3 threads, each one anchored with a knot her grandmother had taught her when she was 9 years old. In the wing chair across the room, Henry Ashford sat with a book in his lap that he was actually reading, for the first time in the history of his ownership of this house. He looked up every few minutes. He did not interrupt her work. He simply watched her hands. In the corner, near the hearth, was a small wooden cradle. It had been carried up from the attic in October. It had not been used yet. But it had been polished and lined, and a soft wool blanket, embroidered with 12 roses, each in a backstitch of 3 threads, had been folded across the foot of it. Helena looked up from her work. "Henry." "Yes." "Tell me about your mother again. The morning she came to your room. I want to remember all of it, so that when she comes home in the spring, I will know how to put my hand on her shoulder." He set the book down. He came to the writing table. He pulled a second chair across the rug and sat down beside her. And he told her again, slowly, carefully, with his hand resting on the edge of her work, what his mother had said to him in the dim before dawn when he was 12. The bells of the village church struck 5. The November light was iron-grey and soft. Outside the library windows, the rose canes were going dormant for another winter. The estate was full again. There was no contract in Helena Marsh's sleeve. There were only her hands, doing the work she had been born to do, in the house she had been born to come to, in the company of the man who had been waiting for her for longer than either of them had known.